President Netanyahu and I discussed again yesterday the critical need for Israel to operate by the laws of war. That means protecting civilians in combat as best as they can.
Now, this is an interesting one because what the president is saying, without saying it, is that he flagged for Netanyahu that they are committing war crimes against civilians. But he didn't want to say it that way to us because that wouldn't sound like Israel's doing the right thing. So instead, he said that he wanted to reiterate or emphasize the importance of following the rules and the laws of war. What he's really saying is that Israel has already violated the laws of war. They have already violated basic human rights. They are engaging actively in discrimination and apartheid in Israel with relation to both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Without saying the truth, the president is saying something similar to the truth. That's what's known as a lie of omission. It's also worth noting that he helped negotiate the first delivery of humanitarian aid, but that humanitarian aid delivery has not been finalized. So what he negotiated was an initial confirmation, initial commitment. But the problem is that both Jordan and Egypt have long-standing fears about what Israel's true intentions are here. You see, the reason that Egypt and Jordan won't accept refugees coming out of the Palestinian states on the West Bank or Gaza is because they know that what the Israelis really want is to force the Palestinians out of Israeli land and force them to live outside of Israel. So if Jordan and Egypt actually accept refugees, what's going to happen is that Israel will never allow those refugees to come back into Israeli land. So that's why Egypt and Jordan are stuck saying no to refugees. That's how sad and well known this conflict is throughout the Middle East, because people understand that there's some trickery involved here. Israel is attacking Gaza in part to force the Palestinians to relocate so that when they have relocated, they can never let them back into Israel again. That's the true purpose behind much of the attack that Israel is launching into Gaza. They don't want to occupy it like they said. They do honestly want to take over all the land and make it part of Israel again. And if they can get the Palestinians out, then they don't have to worry about giving the Palestinians their own state.
I secured an agreement for the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from the United Nations to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. If Hamas does not divert or steal this shipment, we're going to provide an opening for sustained delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance for the Palestinians.
Now, this is the president executing his own provocative move. By telling us and the American people, and of course sending the warning to Hamas as well, that as long as Hamas does not interfere with the delivery of this humanitarian aid into Gaza, then the United States will continue providing humanitarian. There's a problem with this because Gaza it's managed. Its political party is Hamas. It's actually impossible for humanitarian aid to get distributed in Gaza without Hamas playing a role. Hamas will have to divert it. Hamas will have to take accountability of it. Hamas will be in charge of the humanitarian aid because Hamas is the ruling political party in Gaza. It's impossible to get that food into Gaza without Hamas having a touch on it, right? It's unreasonable. It's like saying that you're going to send humanitarian aid to the state of Louisiana without any members of the state of Louisiana supporting in the distribution. So no police, no military, no politicians, no nonprofits, nothing from the state itself. It's not possible. So what the president is really doing here is setting up a situation where Gaza will fail to execute on that objective, and then it'll look like some sort of terrorist organization is blocking the delivery of humanitarian aid.
Just last week, a mother was brutally stabbed. A little boy, here in the United States, a little boy who just turned 6 years old was murdered in their home outside of Chicago. His name was Wadiha, a proud American, a proud Palestinian American family.
So the tragedy against this 6-year-old boy and his mother in Illinois is heart-wrenching. If you haven't read about it, I actually recommend you don't read about it. Just trust me when I tell you that it's a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching story. It is currently under investigation as a possible hate crime. And what is known about it is really relevant to what the president just said, because the president basically said that it was an act of Islamophobia or anti-Islam, or it was somehow racially instigated primarily. What reporting has been done about it so far actually suggests that it might have been more influenced as a result of biased media. The primary suspect, the person arrested with what looks to be pretty convincing evidence that he was the person who stabbed the mother and the child, is a Caucasian white male who was the landlord of the property in which this family lives. However, in the history of the family, that same landlord was actually very positive with the family, building a treehouse for their child, bringing and gifting him toys and positive attention. So it does not look like he was inherently Islamophobic or racially motivated against the family in any way, shape, or form until the attack on October 7th, and until the media started talking about Hamas being a terrorist group and Palestinians being a terrorist group, or the assumption that just by being Palestinian you are also Hamas, which is an inaccurate assumption. There's these non-specifics that are being amplified, these fears being amplified by media, and in that fear, in that jumble of anger and fear, people are taking action. Whether or not that constitutes a hate crime is up to the law enforcement of the land to decide, but it is important to understand that Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are not necessarily the driving force here behind violence that's currently happening as a result of this conflict. There's a great deal of response that's really tied to what we call in the intel community the fog of war. Fog of war meaning that when a war happens and troops start to fight each other, dust gets kicked up, smoke gets kicked up, and you can't actually see the battlefield anymore. And in that absence of clarity, you have a fog of information, a lack of information. That's exactly what we're seeing happen now with the media, with misinformation and disinformation, and with the fact that we are constantly trying to guess and make assumptions about what's currently happening, what will happen in the future. In that fog of war, it leaves people feeling lost. It leaves people feeling scared. It leaves people feeling vulnerable. And in many ways, that is largely being driven in the United States by biased media and by incomplete information, by the three lies that we're here observing even now during this presidential address: lies of commission, lies of influence, and lies of omission. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.